Today from r/EntitledParents. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30-year-old male and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex, with our patient's door on the right of her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions: "Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall?" etc. She stated that she had a pounding headache, and she remembers walking to bed and walking up to the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head, and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital, because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain, and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees, and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks, and we used to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized, then said we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow. She needs to watch my kids." The lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open. And who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yells back, "I told you she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says, "You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital. You're not having a stroke." My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too, when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about. She said that the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea she was supposed to watch the kids at all, because again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these things. Small update. My contact at the hospital said the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I will probably not hear anything back until my next shift next day. So I got in touch with the officer on that call, and he said the woman was not formally charged with anything. The patient is home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed, and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file an order of protection from the neighbor, but I don't believe I will ever be privy to that information unless something happens again.